Patrice from the Queen Sofia Spanish Institute, and today the QSSI is so proud to present a special interview in the area of the Institute's mission, which consists of enhancing our patrons' cultural knowledge about the Spanish-speaking world. Our interview is regarding art and the art world. It's exciting in New York City because we have at the Metropolitan Museum of Art a current exhibition featuring Goya's graphic imagination. The subject is a focus of the talk today with our special invited guests, Francisco Chaparro, who will be interviewed by Cristina Domenech from the QSSI Cultural Committee. And let me tell you a little bit about these two distinguished guests. Francisco Chaparro is a Spaniard who received his Ph.D. in art history at the prestigious Institute of Fine Arts at NYU as a Fulbright scholar. Francisco is currently a professor at IE University in Madrid, and Francisco's doctoral dissertation was focused on Goya and victimhood. So the current Goya exhibition was curated by Mark MacDonald from the Met's Department of Drawings and Print. And Francisco worked very closely for Mark in the organization of all aspects of the exhibition, as well as helping Mark select the 318 pages in this exceptional catalog of the drawings, prints, and lithographs that explains the exhibition. This is the first show, really, that focuses on Goya's career as a printmaker and draftsman, and the interrelation between his prints and drawings and the role they play. It's a unique platform for Goya's creativity. The exhibition also focuses on the investigation of Goya's graphic output. It spans 6 decades, and during Goya's works, it reflects so many eras of that time in Spain: the transformation, the turmoil, ages of enlightenment, the Inquisition, Spain's years of constitutional government. 2 essays, a detailed chronology, the breadth and power of Goya's drawings and prints, situates the artist within his historical moment. The selected pieces document the varied phases and qualities of graphic work by Goya. This is not the first exhibition on Goya's graphic works, since there was recently one held at the Prado Museum in 2020. Throughout this past year, as the world continues to battle COVID and social unrest, this exhibition provides a window into Francisco Goya's social concerns and his relevance about humanity, which in many ways you can parallel the 18th century of Goya's mind and vision to the social issues, some of the social issues that we are facing and dealing with in today's world. So Cristina Domenech is the educational director at the Hispanic Museum and Library, which is located also in New York City, housing the most important collection of Spanish art and literature outside of Spain and Latin America. We are thrilled to have Cristina as a member of our cultural committee, and of course, partnering with the Hispanic Society for the Queen Sofia Spanish Institute is an honor and a privilege always. And Cristina's vast knowledge in art history began at the University of Valencia, where she achieved her PhD with a specialization in contemporary Valencian art. Cristina has also been licensed by CUNY in their graduate program and is pursuing her master's thesis there as well. Cristina has lived in the United States for over a decade. We do hope you enjoy this stimulating conversation between 2 great minds. And again, Francisco and Cristina, we are so honored to have you here within our team and our patron base. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Patrice. You are very nice. It is my honor to be part of this institution, which is actually one of my favorites in New York City. You are doing a great job, and I am very happy and grateful to work with you. And Francisco, welcome. It's a real pleasure talking to you again. We met a few years ago at the Hispanic Society. We both were there, so we already know each other. So first of all, I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about how you got involved in this exhibition in Goya's graphic artworks.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you virtually. It all happened by great coincidence. I was working on my dissertation, and then met, more specifically, Mark McDonald, curator of the Department of Prints of Drawing, was working on a project of exhibition of Goyas Drawings and Prints. So these two paths converged, and I became Curatorial Studies Fellow at the Met, and I started working on the project in its early stages, very right away, doing research and working on the cataloging some drawings and prints, and as the project moved on, eventually on the checklist and the catalog, writing some entries for the catalog and some essays.
Great. I can imagine how difficult it was to select the artworks for the exhibition. Can you just let us know a little bit more about how did you choose and select the artworks on display? Which criteria did you follow to this selection?
Well, Mark McDonald, curator, from the beginning, he had in mind a very concise exhibition with a relatively reduced number of works on view, because they require close examination and detailed inspection. And he wanted to have like a small exhibition. It's now 100 works, more or less. And Goyas Drawings and Prints are disseminated all over the world. There are great collections, such as obviously Prado, Biblioteca Nacional, Metropolitan Museum. So it was a very difficult enterprise to choose just 100 works, more or less, that are representative of all the different aspects of Goya's graphic work, such as all the album drawings he created and the different print series. So the basic idea was to at least to show some illustrative examples of each of the series he created, and the Subject of War, the Caprichos, we'll talk about later, and also the show interconnections between drawings and prints and other aspects of Goya's career. But that was the basic idea.
This question, I had this question for later, but I think it's the right time to talk about how do you relate or are related the drawings and the prints in Goya's artwork? In which way? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Goya was a very, very particular artist when it comes to his graphic output, because he didn't use drawings in a conventional way. Like, we don't have many preparatory drawings, like drawings that were later transformed into paintings. He has a sketchbook from his trip to Italy in the early 1770s, and he created some series that are somewhat conventional, series of copies of Velázquez paintings. But it's in the 1790s, with Goya is 40 years old, that he starts drawing, we can say even compulsively, but he created two series of album drawings. And from one of these, the so-called album B, is where the Caprichos, the project of the Caprichos, one of his most famous print series, is born. So he starts creating drawings on satirical subjects that then transform into preparatory drawings for the caprichos. So we can say that something happened in Goya's life in the 1790s. He became really interested in having these, focusing on his career as a printmaker and draftsman. And it may be related to personal reasons. Obviously, Goya very famously became deaf in 1792. Also, there was a very complex period in political terms because of the French Revolution, the aftermath of the French Revolution, censorship that maybe led Goya to a more private career in parallel to his public career at the court and as a portraitist of the aristocracy in Spain. So multiple factors converge, and in the mid 1790s, he started his career as a draftsman, and he created his most important series of the time, the Caprichos, that was published and was very well known, even if it was withdrawn from the market. It was very well known in Spain.
It's really interesting that he started working in this graphic works on paper in a particular time of his life, and in an age that he was already an old person in at the time. So I think that's really interesting and mysterious, as many other aspects of Goya's art and also life. I'd like you to talk a bit. I know it's a very broad question, but just to give us a kind of a glimpse on Goya's technique, both in drawings and prints.
Well, this is obviously one of the most interesting aspects of this exhibition, and obviously it's a topic that needs subject that needs more research, technical research, and to see how Goya used technique and different techniques to convey certain ideas, and how materiality played a very important role in his work as a graphic artist. He changed technique as he learned how to use different techniques, like aquatint in the 1790s. Like his series of prints on Velázquez in the late 1770s are more linear. We need to keep in mind that the prints were supposed to be more or less neutral representations. Like you wouldn't see the hand of the artist. They would use like cross-hatching and linear intersections and to create tones. And even in his early career, in his early prints, Goya is really more expressive artist, and he used a line in a more expressive way, to the point that in a version he wanted to make of the Meninas, famous painted by Velázquez, he ruined the copper plate because he started experimenting with the roulette. And this is to create like a very deep velvety black tone. And in the Caprichos, he started using the aquatint, which creates also tone using grains of rosin, and he became a master, absolute master in that. The technique was imported from England and France. And it was very well suited to the Caprichos, because used for private contemplation. Those were satirical works, but they were supposed to be, we have some comments to the Caprichos, which probably suggest that they were seen together, like in gatherings, literary gatherings, and they would be reading the comments or commenting each of the images. The disasters are completely different, because they were made in a period of great scarcity, and he didn't have access to good materials. And in 4 plates were just normal plates cut in half, because he didn't have access to normal plates, and nor good rosin. Like let's say that he explored about quality of this exploited the bad quality of the materials he had to convey this roughness and this material violence that is very resonates with the topic of war and physical violence. And then with the lithography in the 1820s, which he learned when he was in 1819, he was probably the first Spanish artist to adopt lithography. This is really remarkable, as 73 years old. And his technique also is really passionate. It's very physical. You see that he uses the knife, he scratches the surface of the lithographic stone. And as a draftsman, he's also very remarkable that he changed techniques. He used sometimes a wash that led him to some changes in his painting as well. So it's very interesting how these different aspects of Goya's work are connected. He also used a lithographic crayon or grease crayon that he was using for the lithography. He had sometimes burnished the paper, which is really rare. You can see like the great texture in the drawings. Changes different types of inks. Sometimes he went back and modified the drawing he had previously made. So it seems like a technique was really central to his work as a printmaker and draftsman. It wasn't just simply a vehicle to convey the subject or represent the subject, or a neutral and transparent way of depicting something, as some printmakers were expected to be. Was quite the opposite for him, and you can see that throughout the exhibition. The technique wasn't essential. It was a way of thinking, and you can see how his artistic thinking and visual thinking evolved through technique.
Yeah, to me it's really remarkable how being so old and in exile, if I am not mistaken, he undertook this new technique. It was just this famous. It is related with this famous sentence or quote. He said that I'm always learning, siempre aprendo, no?
Yeah.
Being part, I guess, that gives him this kind of unique.
Indeed. He even created a series of miniatures and ivories that are not very well known. A few of them are the Boston Method. And he, in a letter to a friend, he explained a little bit the technique. And we know, because of a person who was very close to him in his years in France, that how he made those. It was not very conventional at all. He learned even when he was that till the very last day of his life. He was also a teacher, and we have at the Hispanic Society and other places copies of Rosario Ways. So she learned to draw by copying the caprichos with Goya, and in some drawings, like some the Lázaro Galdiano Museum in Madrid, we don't know if they were made by Goya or Rosario Ways. So he was also like very generous, it seems, with his talent.
Mm-hmm. Going back a little bit what Patrice already introduced about the subjects and how he addressed the subjects in his graphic works. Of course, since this part of his artwork was not a commission, my guess is that, of course, he felt much more free to express himself. But at the same time, he was a man of his time. He lived in a very complicated time in Spain. He was deeply involved in the principles of the Enlightenment, and of course his art is a reflection of his experience in life. But it's remarkable how all the subjects, or most of the subjects that we can see in his artworks on paper are still valid. He addresses violence against women, war, ignorance, superstition, imposture, so many subjects that I immediately relate with subjects that we are living nowadays. So how can you explain that?
Yeah, exactly. It's not just that Goya was a relevant artist, it's relevant to us. And that's why this exhibition obviously was planned a few years ago, but it works in a different way now, because we have there's a certain political and social climate that makes us appreciate Goya's work in a different way. Because he was living in a period of great change. And this is the transition between the old regime, the ancient regime, and new societies, new parliamentary societies with inherent rights, human rights. And obviously this is a period where this is the change is happening. There's a crack and there's a decline in the credibility of authority, and also the visual languages they use, changes in culture, changes in the freedom for women and social customs. So it's very interesting that he had a great intuition. Goya was at the right time and the right place, because he had one foot in each side. He was a painter at the court. He was a first court painter, and I believe he was admired by Charles IV, not so much by his son, but so he was the most important artist, the most important official artist, and at the same time he was extremely well connected with enlightened circles and with the most important intellectuals at the time. And even in a few years later, during the period of the Peninsular War and during the period of the proclamation of the Spanish Constitution, he was close with the president of the courts. Like, he was very well connected. But I had the perception that he was also a very particular observer, because he became not socially isolated for sure, but physically isolated because of his illness. Like, he became deaf and he concentrated, he became an observer. I think that reflects in his works. He starts drawing and perceiving reality in a different way, and modifying and playing with the reality in his drawings and the prints. But even very early on in his career, there's a print and view at the show, Garrote Man, which we see a prisoner that has been executed at the garrote, this device, this strangle device, and he's totally disconnected with the rest of his graphic output at the time, has no meaning there, which suggests that he was interested in these subjects, but it wasn't the right time to do so. This was the late 70s, a period where the abolition of torture was really discussed because of Beccaria and other writers. And Goya probably was reflecting on that. And then you see a very similar work, a very similar image in two plates of the Disasters of War, made 35 years later, somewhat less. So it seems like probably for him, these concerns were really important, but it was because of the crisis of the mid 1790s that he was able to explore that. Of course, in the aftermath of the Peninsular War, we know that he was interested in new novels and sentimental novels, and he obviously was friends with Moratín and Melendez Valdez. So we see a little bit of that in his drawing. He wasn't an intellectual, but he was very, very well informed, and he loved theater, and also some drawings recall theater stages, and there's something that appears to be something happening, like it's a theater play, but we don't know the script. And I think the script is society, the changes that were happening, and he used fiction as a way to expose new realities. And you say it very well, like violence against women, and or scenes of prostitution, but also freedom to love whomever you want to love. and social restrictions and the decline of aristocracy and ideals. Also, he can be very idealistic. In his album C, he addresses the truth, justice in a very human way, and but he's really connect to the right people at the right time. So he's a thermometer of changes that were happening below censorship or behind censorship, behind the scenes, and that possibly didn't materialize politically until the Spanish Constitution, but we have the visual expression of them in the work of Goya, that something was brewing, as it were, and even as early as the 1770s.
Right. This is related with my next question. Because one of the most striking points when you saw his graphic artworks, and when I saw the exhibition at the Metropolitan, is again, it's every time I can watch his works on paper, I always have the impression that there's something that I don't understand. They are very mysterious, very like obscure in some ways, and also the captions sometimes are even more confusing. So my question is, you mentioned censorship at the time. It could be that the reason, because he created this kind of unclear images and captions. Actually, the disasters and the
Tauromaquia, yeah.
were not published.
Yeah.
So called in during his life. Maybe
Right.
it was censorship, or of course they are all this obscurity and mysterious subjects are related to his astonishing mindset and his imagination.
Well, that's a great question. He started using captions or titles. We don't know what they are. They are captions, titles. We don't know. In his drawings, which is very interesting because they were not supposed to be seen by anyone. Which means that for him, those were part of the I don't want to say even image of the work. And in the Caprices, it makes a sense because we know, because of these comments I mentioned before, that the commentaries to the Caprices, that some people try to identify the characters you see in the images and relate to important people at the time. And we know that most likely he had trouble with Inquisition. In 1803, he sold the plates to the king. It's possible, but that it was because of the Inquisition. But I think also that they amplified the message, and ambivalence was part of the message. But of course, the Inquisition was still active at the time. There's criticism to friars and aristocracy, and that was a dangerous thing to do, even if it was protected by the king, as we think obviously he really was. For the disasters, this is really, really, really interesting because obviously, as you said, they were not published in his lifetime, and we know the titles because of a complete set that he sent to his friend Van Bermudez, that is now at the British Museum, and there are captions written by Goya. So we don't know if he made those in collaboration or not. We don't know. The thing is that the captions were there, and these are definitely not descriptive, not titles. Sometimes it seems like we don't know who's talking. Is Goya talking? Is he talking to the characters in the scene? Is he talking to us? He's creating introducing the voice in order to create a dialogue, I think, a moral dialogue. And sometimes is outrage what he communicates, and in others is simply is anchoring the image in reality, like in Yolovi. like I saw it, like this is reality. It's really interesting that in the Tauromachia also we have his personal copy, his private copy of the complete set with titles at the Boston Public Library, and another one at by also previously owned by Thean Bermudez. He changed the titles, and he was toying with the order of the plates. So we know it was an important element, a very important element for him. The disparates, we only know they were not published, and we have some captions in some of the preparatory drawings, and that's that we know. And and obviously the album drawings he kept using, and in some of them he kept using titles. That in others is just, as you said, visual indications of the content in sometimes, because there are very obscure images. I'm thinking particularly of one image in the show that's called Telegraph. It's an acrobat, and if it wasn't because of that indication, it would be impossible to interpret that. He is a figure that is doing like a move that resembles like a telegraph. But is sometimes just irony. He's using irony. But why is he changing and modifying the titles? What was the audience? We don't know much about the real audience, but for sure he's creating a virtual, we can say, audience, and we're a part of it. And the connection, the link is the text, the captions.
That's to me, it's like really interesting, and I really love this series. And we know that both the prints and the drawings are like gathered in albums and in this series of prints. Can you just speak a little bit about how those were like gathered together? Was the artist who did that, or it was another person or another persons afterwards who created these albums?
Well, this is really interesting, because we don't know anything about Goya's drawings during his lifetime. I mean, it's just he kept the drawings at home, most probably in different. They have different sizes, different formats. So they were probably bound together. They had different papers, different materials. Some of them probably were not bound, but we know they were stored at home, because we have some sources that tell us that there were 3 books with drawings. So probably it was Goya's son Javier that bound all the drawings following an order way, because all these drawings have a number. Each album all the albums are numbered. But then some illustrious visitors, like Sterling Maxwell, who visited Goya's son in like obviously after Goya's death, he, because of like comment he makes, we think the books were still intact, the albums, and because of the order of the images was the right one. But then when Goya's son Javier died, and his grandson inherited everything, and he starts selling the plates and Goya's works, they were dismantled. Some of them were bought by the Madrazo family, the Madrazo family of painters. They were very important. And Federico Madrazo was the director of the Prado, and they controlled the Spanish art system for until the late 19th century. And so they were divided into small sections, fragments, like, and the albums were mixed. And a selection of these, for instance, this known Fortuny album, because Madrazo and Fortuny families obviously united, ended up at the Met, and is one of the most important selections in Goya's work. It's at the Met, they call it the Fortuny album. And the original book where the drawings were bound is still there at the Met's collection. Then there were also preparatory drawings for the caprichos and the disaster, because as I said before, this is very interesting that he started from drawings, like the prints were based on drawings, but were not literal transcriptions of the drawings. He made changes on the copper plate, and there are 300 more or less, and they were bought by one of the earliest scholars on Goya, and he met Goya personally, Valentin Cardelera, and bought them from the Bermudez family, and these are now at the Prado Museum, most of them. And the work improves. Well, I made reference before to the complete sets we have at the British Museum. There are work improves everywhere, which means there are prints or that impressions that were made during Goya's lifetime. When we don't have editions, like in the Disasters of War or the Separates, there are sometimes some work improves, or when he was making changes, like he was making changes in the composition, we can see different versions of the Capriccio, and they are literally everywhere. And obviously that's a good thing of prints as opposed to drawings, that two museums can have a first edition of the Capriccios and you can see the same thing in the same work in different places, although the plates, as the plate worn out, there may be changes, so you can recognize an early impression of a plate or a late one, but that's the basic story. And only one album C, which is known as the Inquisition album because it contains many representations of the Inquisition, has been preserved almost intact at the Prado Museum, except for two works of the Hispanic Society. They're at the British Museum, and a few of them in private collections, but they are all over the place.
Mm-hmm. That was actually my next question. How this enormous production of artworks on paper are, but where during his life and afterwards? You in part already answered my question, but I know that the Prado has some.
That's a great collection.
Also the Metropolitan Museum, but can you just let us know a little bit about mainly during his life?
Well, we know because of when there was a purification period after the Peninsular War, that a friend of Goya's said in his defense, because of the members of the court, because he was a court painter, and they were trying to see who was collaborating with the French authorities during the occupation of Madrid. And this person said of Goya that he retired from the court and he was busy drawing and making prints. So that's what reference we know that obviously we know what he was doing at the time, drawing his album C and F and the disasters. The thing is that obviously the drawings were not as well known as the prints, because prints can be disseminated. There were illegal copies or versions of the Capriccios already in the early 19th century in France. And of course, there were late editions of the disasters in the 1860s, and the disparates and the Capriccios, because of the story of the copper plates. Like I said before, that the Capriccios, the plates remain in Spain in what it was called the Royal Calcography Nacional, Narabas. Others were sold, taken to France, then they were returned, and most of them are at the Real Academia de Bellas Artes Calcografía Nacional, and some editions were made, and the last one was in the, I think it was 1983, the Tauromaquia, but they were not supposed to be, they were still there, there won't be more editions. And but interest in Goya's drawings grew in the late 19th century, and there were very important auctions in the 1877. You can see the numbers, like how these works were numbered in some of the drawings on the show. And obviously because of conservation problems, because they are very delicate works, very sensitive to light, you can see them very often. The exhibition last year at the Prado was really exceptional. There used to be a room at the Prado just for Goya's drawings, and they would rotate, because the Prado has hundreds of them. But I think the most important event was when in the 1960s, Thomas Harris, brother of Enriqueta Harris, he was a really great scholar on Goya's prints, and he created like the most important reference on Goya's prints and 2 volumes. He was also a collector, and he was able to buy the 2 sets I made, I mentioned before, from Van Bermudez, and that's why they are now at the British Museum. And these are probably the most important works, because it's as close as we can be to a first edition, contemporary edition of the disasters. Because it's interesting how aesthetic tastes evolve, and the first edition in the 60s is really different from the works that Goya made because of the influence of photography. In part, they were like more late tone, and they are a little bit darker. So, and there are works of Goya everywhere, because obviously there are many editions of the Caprichos and the disasters. So that's why, and that's something I get asked very often, like, I want to see the Caprichos or the disasters, like if there was one. There's not. Obviously, there's only one. As I said, like one complete set, 2 of the disasters, but that's a great luck we have, that we can go to these shows and enjoy these works in different places at the same time. But seeing those in combination, like it really like first editions, working proofs, rare prints like the giant or the landscape that are on the view of the show, that's extremely rare. It's very unique.
Absolutely. You mentioned, Francisco, photography. And I know that in your dissertation, you dedicated a chapter to Goya's relationship with photography. We all know that he could not know about photography, but I guess that I think that he was familiar with the use of the camera obscura, which is of course related with the photography. And to me this is a really interesting subject, because in my opinion, Goya has a really photographic eye. Could you just let us know more about this subject?
Yeah, for me, it's fascinating too. Obviously, he didn't have access to the photographic machine, the photographic camera at the time, but he was obviously familiar with optical devices, and we know that just this drawing at the Hispanic Society to Tilibundi, these were very famous entertainments. We know that he used, and he know to use very well, like camera obscura, because some references and some independent drawings suggest he may have used in some cases optical devices. But very early on in the 19th century, there were already comments about the images that look like a daguerreotype, right? And but I think there was the problems of interpretation, meaning that some scholars that would connect Goya to photography obviously was not the use of the camera, but this neutrality of the hand, which I don't agree with, because I think Goya's images are everything but neutral. So as I said before, prints were supposed to have this linear technique they use, as more impersonal, neutral, and I think that was the connection to photography, that they were trying to have a neutral copies of other works of art, like images not made by any hand, right? For Goya it was different. I think there was this desire to have an image connected to reality, what Geoffrey Butchen defined as the burning with desire, like artists, people were burning with desire of having these real images. organic images, as it were, right? And I think Goya is aiming at the same place when he's creating specifically his disasters of war. That there are in some of the plates, there's this sensation, this feeling that the image hasn't been organized. Like there's no artistic intervention. Everything is a chaos, it's chaotic, and there's visual disarrangement. And I think he tried to create that to convey the idea of being present in an image, and it's a natural image that hasn't been organized by any artist. And also the immediacy of the image, like this unfiltered quality and adulterated quality, like this is real. This hasn't been processed by anything, by an artistic hand. There's no beauty here. So I think this is obviously a way in which he relates to photography and the brutality of his images. That was not that was something we have to take for granted. It was shocking, like the disasters. And I was thinking about obviously his painting, the 2nd and 3rd of May at the Prado Museum, on the uprising of the people in Madrid against the French and the violence, repression, right?
I was in the same painting.
Exactly, you can see that, and they were not. The people didn't like that. I mean, they were stored right away, and I think it's part of the same thing that when Matthew Brady and Alexander Gardner showed these images of the American Civil War, and some journalists said that they have brought the bodies of the dead soldiers to the to the doors and to the streets of New York, and people were shocked. I think it was exactly the same thing. Transferring or transporting this iconography of violence that was common maybe in popular prints, but not at all in big format, was really unheard of. And that's one of the reasons I think why the disasters were not published. People were not prepared for it. It wasn't just as it's often said that it wasn't right at the time, that people were tired of war after 6 years. I think it was simply visually and aesthetically were not prepared to understand that. So I think that the main connection with there was a big show about the Goya photography 12 years ago, but it had this, the main argument was this, like the neutrality of the image, which I don't agree. Basically, my dissertation, I was making a case for this intentional connection with photography, the idea of presenting an image that is raw and directly connected to the image. Sometimes he uses captions like "Yo lo vi," I saw it. So exactly. So you don't have the indexicality, as it is called, of the photographic image, that the image emanates, irradiates from reality. But you have the artist saying, "I was there and I saw this. So this is reality, the truth effect of the image."
Yeah. I think it's a very, very fascinating subject, and I love to read your dissertation published. And this is the last question. I don't want to take more time from you, but I know that in Spain now it's already like 8 in the
8 p.m.
Yeah. So but I believe this is a very tricky question, but I can't help myself. Making an exercise of like simplification, of course, where would you place Goya's artwork and in general within Western art canon?
Well, this looks like a very simple question and a very difficult question at the same time, because obviously Goya is a universal figure, and of course everybody knows it, and he's part of the canon for sure. But where? Like, if we start thinking is these periods, and it's interesting that I get asked very often by my students when I teach this subject. Is he a romantic artist? Is he Goya a classical artist? Is he an expressionist artist? Even he's not. He's nothing. And that's one of the things that makes him modern, because we need to remember that this is in a way the decline of visual painting, like religious painting that had dominated Western art for centuries. There are dramatic changes in the 19th century, like this styles start to fossilize. In Spain, we see painters, great painters that start imitating 17th century painters, because there's no renovation of style. And of course, there's new classicism, so it's he moves. Goya changes. Goya he is always open to change and evolution. It's for me, it's fascinating that when he's in France in his self-imposed exile, but exile nevertheless, and he's there, and Jericho and Delacroix are there, and they're obviously much younger artists, but their works are really, really connected. They are coming from different places, obviously, and because Delacroix knew Goya's work, but he's capricious. He didn't have a feeling of the, a complete view of his career. Obviously, nobody really had. And he had this extraordinary artistic intuition and was able to change and address new subjects. And I think that one of the characteristics of the modernity is the freedom of the artist when he emancipates from the court and the church and starts working for clientele, the bourgeoisie. And he stops working on commission and just creates and then sell the works. And Goya can afford to do that because as an artist, he's free, and he has a great private output and a great private work. And in a way that his subjects are an expression of his freedom, either this freedom. So in that way, he's fantastic because he enables us to trace this evolution from the artist of the court that works for the aristocracy and has to follow the rules, which we know he hated. He was an academician, a member of the academy, and he hated rules. Like these contradictions that are intrinsic to this period of change that Goya really embodies, and you see that in his art, like in the difficulties he had representing conventional allegory, and how he changed the traditional typology, such as the female nude like a Venus, the typology of the Venus. He transforms that into a woman, and 63 years before Manet's Olympia, for instance, or I don't know, it's when in his religious paintings, the Santa Florida, and they are very humane scenes, not like he doesn't like the supernatural when it's supposed to be adulatory or used as a fossilized device, but he loves fantasy when he can use that for his expressive freedom, and obviously his paintings for the Suna family and witchcraft. So it's really strange that we know for sure that what he valued most was his freedom, his artistic freedom, which was not easy for an artist who lived in so complicated times and was trained as a conventional artist in a workshop, and ended up being like the most important independent artist in the history of Spanish art, for sure.
Great. I think it's it's a wonderful sentence. Finish the interview. I mean, I will keep talking to you for hours, because you are a very, very talented scholar on Goya, and also because I really, really love Goya's art, and even his personality. To me, is if I have to choose a painter, I picked him for sure. So I have enjoyed so much this
Thank you,
Francisco, and thank you so much for finding the time to meet with us and to give us this such an in-deep view to the exhibition. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.